All right, Tim. I know you guys don't cover the financial side of the PC industry, but I thought I'd ask, or I thought I'd take a shot at engaging the money part of your brain with this question. Have you got a money part of your brain, Tim?
Not really.
So- Given all the doom and gloom news of PC hardware sales being down, how long will it be until Intel, Nvidia, AMD, and their partners lower GPU and motherboard prices to something approaching sanity?
Doesn't seem to be the strategy at the moment from these companies. It's more about adjusting the supply side of things to match the demand. So instead of producing heaps of, GPUs or CPUs or whatever and going, whoops, we made too many of these and they're not selling at this price, now we have to lower prices, they're trying to make less of them. So then they don't have to sell as many and they can sort of match it up to the people who are willing to pay the current prices a bit better. So it seems like all companies are sort of on board with that strategy right now. Which again, it sort of makes sense from their perspective, right? Like instead of taking those $300 CPUs and making them $200 to sell more, you just sell fewer $300 CPUs. But again, they have to weigh that up with, can we, incentivize people who only have $200 to spend to buy something? And you need to have a product in that price category to sell, but it could be an inferior product, of course. So I think with the CPU side of things, we typically see a very good spread of products right down to the sort of $100 range. Same with motherboards. A620 boards may not be amazing if you're buying an AM5, product, but they exist. Whereas on the GPU side of things, clearly they've got issues now where there's no products at low prices.
Yeah, I mean, it seems
So
pretty clear to me, like we discussed last Q&A, where you sort of, I don't know if you disagree with me, you just thought it wasn't very plausible in terms of, financial meetings and whatnot. But it seems to me that they've seen this opportunity. Well, the cryptocurrency boom thing, what is it, like the third time it's happened? But this was the most
I think so.
significant time.
At least twice.
At least twice significantly.
Yeah.
So you've got the pandemic, cryptocurrency boom. It was like roughly a 2-year period there where you couldn't buy a graphics card. Basically, the demand was so extreme that it just couldn't be met. They couldn't meet it. They were pumping out the cards as fast as they could, and they were basically sold before they entered the retail channels. They were just gone. So that was good for them. Record profit margins, all that stuff that corporations love. And they're like, well, the good times are they're going to end at some point. They probably ended a bit sooner than they were hoping for. We don't want them to end. We want to keep making good profits. We don't want, AMD's historically been a company that sort of bunches of punches, whereas Nvidia's a bit more of a heavy hitter. And they just want to keep those good times going. So they've tried to keep, I think they're trying to balance the whole gamers' demand and hunger for products. Yep. And rather than just turn the tap back on and go, here you go, $300 GPUs, life's good again, enjoy. They're like, we're not really going back to those times. We're going to keep you guys kind of desperate for PC hardware. Although you're aware that cryptocurrency is over, you're aware that availability is as strong as it's ever been, we're still keeping that mindset of these are premium products that cost a lot of money. If you want them, you pay a lot of money. Hence $800 US 4070 Ti, which is absurd. But that's what they're trying to maintain. And it's sort of this, I don't know, arm wrestle or gamers holding out to force the prices down. And I think NVIDIA is trying to hold out for as long as they possibly can. Like they're trying to make this the new norm. They're trying to recondition gamers and reviewers and just the whole industry into what they should expect, which is what I said a month or two ago. And you didn't necessarily disagree, but you're like, well, when you get to shareholder meetings and they're like, sales have been crap.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're trying. I think they're trying. I don't think it'll work, but I think they'll try.
I think they're definitely trying. It's hard to sort of gauge to what degree they've had success with that, because if they've raised, because they're definitely going to have success with it, because they don't need to necessarily double GPU prices for it to be successful. If they've increased them by even 30%, maybe that will be mission success.
Yeah, for sure.
So they're definitely trying to recondition the market into higher prices. How high they're happy with, I don't know. But that is without question what they're trying to do, in my opinion. And this is how it's playing out. So if people don't rush out and buy 4070s and stuff, and it's tough for reviewers because I really struggled with my 4070 review. I know we're going a little bit off topic here, but let's talk about the 4070 review for a second.
Sure.
Because when you put the numbers in, when you do like the MSRP thing, like, you know, we did the MSRP cost per frame, we did the typical current retail price MSRP retail pricing, and it still turned out pretty good there. It was pretty good there. When you look at the MSRP, the 4070 is the best value $500 plus GPU that we've had for a generation now. Like the previous generation GPUs, it is a little bit better in terms of cost per frame. I'm not saying that's great. Normally I would demand more, but I found it hard to really slam the product how I would have if it had been, if the cost per frame hadn't been as good as it was. So yeah, that's why I put the poll on the community tab asking whether you guys thought I went a bit too soft, a bit too fair. And I think most of you agreed it was okay, just right sort of thing. And then the rest of you were like a bit too soft, which I could certainly understand and didn't necessarily disagree with. It was a tough review for me, that one. Yeah, I didn't really know. It's hard to slam a product and call it absolute garbage in terms of value when it's the best value, like statistically, like the data's there. It is the best value $500 plus GPU we've had for 2 or 3 years now. And even Turing wouldn't stack up that well. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, it's difficult because you're trying to keep in mind the current conditions of things. And then I think a lot of gamers are comparing that to previous generations and what we've got in previous generations.
Like
and
back at Pascal or whatever.
Which again, that's a very fair comparison to make. A lot of people have been gamers for a while and are very familiar with those conditions. Even things like the 3070 was a huge leap in value compared to the 2070, which, that was just the previous generation. So again, it's a very complicated situation. And I think, with these pricing things, it really is a battle of like, what are they going to do? Are consumers going to accept that? And is there any competition forcing them in one way or another? And I think the CPU side of things has definitely forced, like, I'm sure AMD would love not to sell a CPU at $200. Like, they'd just be like, yeah, it'd be awesome if people were forced to spend $300, $400, but they can't because Intel offers plenty of CPUs around that sort of price. Whereas, again, on the GPU side, it's very different, and it seems to be that both companies are sort of on that same page of like, we are going to take as long as possible to release our low-end GPUs, so then people are incentivized to try and, spend more. And I guess part of it is waiting for sort of that next big game as well. Like if they can hold out so that a big game launches that's really demanding and that happens before people can buy low-end GPUs, then it's going to incentivize a lot of upgrades. And we're seeing that cycle get longer between the high-end product and the low-end products is getting longer and longer and longer.
Yeah, reconditioning the market.
Because as we've seen, the dies are being shipped in laptops right now. Like there's nothing stopping NVIDIA right now launching a GA107 die or whatever.
Yeah, it's all very deliberate.
What is it these days? AD107.
Yes.
An AD107 die. So it's all very deliberate, but I think what we're seeing today, right now from gamers, is that they're holding out much more than what I have expected and what we've seen in previous generations. Like even the 20 series, there was a lot of pushback about lack of value, lack of improvement. But those cards still sold out day one.
The ray tracing hype was so
it was crazy.
Strong.
Like
there was no ray tracing titles at all either, mind you.
Yeah, so
crazy.
Back then, they were still flying off shelves. A lot of people were buying them for whatever reason, probably ray tracing it and so on. Whereas today, it's really a low market. It's very, very slow.
Yeah, I mean, the gamers in the know sort of know about the 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Developers have said that's the bare minimum moving forward for 1080p, sort of maybe not even high, medium settings. So the VRAM is a concern. I think while I'm certainly not suggesting that ray tracing is a gimmick by any means. I've continually become more and more impressed over the years with what ray tracing can do. My opinion on ray tracing has evolved as the implementations have evolved, which I think is very fair. But we poll this with you guys regularly. Has ray tracing been disappointing? How much do you prioritize ray tracing? And it seems like ray tracing isn't a huge priority for a lot of our audience. And I think the sort of ray tracing cat is out of the bag type deal, people aren't as hyped for that angle anymore. So it's a nice thing, you want to keep that in mind, ray tracing. You want some good ray tracing performance, because there might be like a new Cyberpunk type game that looks absolutely breathtaking with ray tracing. So you want the maximum performance. So that's all very reasonable and realistic. But at the same time, I think a lot of gamers are like, yeah, not wanting to pay a huge premium for that. Not as hyped for ray tracing as I was a few years ago.
It hasn't been the whirlwind revolution that I think some people are expecting it to be.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, I feel like at the time we were sort of saying it's going to take a long time for that sort of thing to happen, and people were sort of expecting 1 to 2 years, and we're like 5 years in.
It's the future, Tim. You don't know what you're talking about.
But we've even seen from games like the new Cyberpunk path tracing mode that only runs on the absolute highest end NVIDIA GPUs, and even then it's with significant levels of scaling happening with DLSS 3 enabled and DLSS super resolution running in its performance mode. So, and that's with a top tier GPU. So it's clear that even this generation is struggling with the visuals that most people would class as being that sort of the leap we were waiting for. Like the path tracing mode does look pretty good, and I think a lot of games would look better with something like that. But if you can't run it on a $500 GPU, or even better, a $300 or $200 GPU,
we can see the tactics being repeated, right? They're trying to hype with that. It's not really feasible. It's like very much what ray tracing was early on, which I think we rightfully said it so looking back, was that it was a tech demo. Ray tracing initially on your RTX 2080 Ti, when we got a couple of games, it was more of a tech demo, especially for those that didn't have the absolute best hardware. It was a tech demo. Turn on, had to look cool. I'm not going to play the game at 30 FPS or less. And now, as I said, now that the sort of hype has died down, they're rehyping it with a new iteration.
They're giving it another taste of what's to come. So I think that angle has sort of not worked out perhaps as much as they would have liked, but then the DLSS angle has sort of taken over a lot of that in some respects, and that is a feature that people are really looking out for these days. So, there's just ebbs and flows with those sorts of things. I expect with, Unreal Engine 5 nanite games that's going to bring in a new wave of sort of hype about games and get people upgrading to things that support that sort of technology. Again, we don't have a really good insight into what that's going to require yet, outside of like Fortnite. Which again, I don't think many people are making too many conclusions on that, but it's one of these really interesting things where you look at the market and there's a lot of very interesting angles. Like there's all sorts of different things you can look at and see what they're trying to do. And, what are investors going to say when GPU sales are poor? Are they going to tank the stock price? Or in the case of NVIDIA, they're getting a lot of momentum from AI acceleration at the moment and powering the latest AI tools, and that could really save them and really, gloss over the issues with their gaming division. So, there's so many different things happening at the moment that the only thing you can do as a consumer is just, if you're not satisfied with the products and you think they're poor value, don't buy them. That's all you can do. Wait for something, keep holding out, keep waiting, and keep messing around with games, different quality settings, seeing how you can optimize what you currently have. Because over the pandemic, lots of people were doing that, sort of having a look and say, oh, I actually don't need to game on ultra. High settings, medium settings look really good. That's enough for me. That's still a great way to go about things and sort of, just optimize what you have, hold out. And I think that eventually, if people do that for a long enough period of time, will win out. But
it's exactly right. I mean, that's the point I tried to make in my original 8GB versus 16GB VRAM comparison, is that an RTX 3070 is still a really impressive graphics card. It works really well. It's just not a premium tier product where you can crank up the visuals and turn on ray tracing in the latest and greatest games, because they do require more than 8GB of VRAM. But as Tim's saying, that's not to say that you should throw your 3070 out. I'll be totally bummed that you bought it. You just have to dial the settings down a bit, and it's playable. And I tried to make that clear in the video. Like, we weren't saying, oh, this thing's completely useless now. If you bought it, you wasted all your money. It's just a bit unfortunate that a lot of people probably bought an RTX 3070. I know there was the whole cryptocurrency thing over an RX 6800 because, ray tracing, DLSS, which turned out to be, a great thing. But because of the superior ray tracing, and that's a bit awkward.
Yeah. But that's always the way. People get a little bit upset when a product that was high end is now classed as mid range, and that's sort of a pain point for a lot of people.
It's inevitable. You just hope that it doesn't happen so quickly and so
but even when it does inevitably happen, there's a little bit of frustration there that they no longer have the best cutting edge stuff anymore, and it's becoming clear they have to upgrade. That's always a difficult position to be in for people. So I understand that, but it always happens. So I'm sure 3090 buyers were sort of feeling some of that now when that performance is available at a much lower price these days. So it just happens all the time. So yeah.